Welcome. I'm going to be discussing about the shit I like about Sly 2 and why I thought it was a great game growing up as a kid. For starters, it literally did phenomenally compared to the very first game, whereas the very first game was strictly just point A to B, and only the free roam section was just only the hub of each map and nothing more. Whereas in this game, you had an entire hub that was like 5 times the size, which classified itself as a whole free roam sandbox. That alone says, the developers wanted to make something, totally different and continue on. They didn't want a platformer A to B, which they could have just stuck with and I would have been fine. But this is where I actually have a confirmed bias. I played Sly 2 before the other Sly games. Reason being, I was evicted from my last home when I was 10 to 11, and I moved in with my grandmother's. Luckily, my uncle had his copy, otherwise I wouldn't have heard about Sly 2 or the Sly series probably later on into my life. Sly 2 is more or less based off of trying to collect the parts from Clockwork that needed to be either destroyed or kept safe in the right hands, because Sly fended off himself and destroyed Clockwork in the very first IP. In this game, he wants to make sure that no one else gets their hands on these parts, since there's been word that people are collecting them. Sly wants to make sure that no one, repairs him and brings him back to life. He wants to make sure that if he can get rid of those parts and make sure that they're all entirely destroyed by his own hands and in his own ambitions, that it will be completely done and over with, which he still failed to do in this game. The character development of the game was better than any other fucking game in its series. Bentley is coming out, he's helping you on the field, he's hacking shit instead of doing it behind closed doors, instead of having you do everything. Murray's actually lifting up the heavy things, he's busting through windows, through the walls of the buildings, busting down doors, he two-shots enemies. It's ridiculous. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And it didn't stop there with character development. Carmelita also didn't sound like a one-sided bitch into the game. It was more or less that she was also having a little bit of a confliction of whether or not she liked the ringtail and where she belonged in the series. Sadly to say, it still continued on until like the very 4th IP, or later into the 3rd game, where she gave him a chance. That was until she manipulated him, even though they both were manipulating each other. I'll get to that shit later. Yes, it's very confusing. Sex and lies. To accommodate Carmelita, she also had a sidekick that was introduced in the beginning of this game in Cairo, which is the prologue to Sly 2. Her name was Constable Neela. Constable Neela turned out to be the very end game villain. She's been playing everyone by the strings throughout every encounter she had with Sly. In fact, she was helping him with keys and things unofficially behind closed doors. And when I mean by closed doors, I mean by trying to go around the map spastically, spur-like, for no fucking reason, even though it led no real direction to the location where they should. All they had to do was just go straight. Instead, you're just flying across the entire map. It was just a follow me and catch up kind of missions that you had with her. Not on every episode though. One of my favorite maps out of a few in Sly 2 was where you had to go to Prague and confront Contessa, and also where you had to free Sly and Murray. You're playing as Bentley. Beforehand, you would have to hunt down Rajan in his second India map, where he has a giant spice facility in an abandoned temple. In between leaving India and going to Prague was the cutscene of Neela actually exposing that she's playing, devil's advocate, and she betrays Carmelita and Sly by giving them both to Contessa. Later in the game, she also confronts Contessa for her own ambitions of trying to gather the Clockwork parts. Which brings us to her initial plan of having all the clockwork parts shipped into one area of the game, and it'll be Arpeggio's skyship, specifically his private blimp, where they'll be having a discussion and hiding at for the time being until Sly reaches over there and fuses all the clockwork parts together, and then he finally confronts Arpeggio and Neela together. Neela instead betrays Arpeggio and takes the clockwork frame for herself. Arpeggio is by far the notorious Sly Cooper villain for having the least amount of screen time, just because his backstory is complete dog shit. He wants the clockwork frame just because he can't fly, and that's why he's having all the parts shipped around. She takes it for herself and hops into the machine's frame in the mouth and has her body destroyed, and her body is now infused with the clockwork frame, turning her into Clockla. And Sly would have to fend off and finish her at the very end of the game. Once he does, they'll both land in Paris. Bentley would have to hop into the mouth and remove the chip. His legs get crushed from the frame because the mouth is not being supported by the machine because the machine's clearly off. And that will entail how Bentley has no real movement on his legs anymore, and at that point he's crippled throughout the entirety of the series, leading on to the third game and then the fourth. I've really enjoyed making this video, and it's been a really good experience. I'm really happy that I talked about this, and I hope I get to make more like these later on, depending on how you guys feel about it. You let me know in the comment section if you guys want to see more of how I discuss games, specifically on my own take, and how I present them, and it's going to inspire me to make more. Next video, hopefully, I'll talk about Mortal Kombat Deception and how much of a dog shit but lovely game that was. And yeah, I'm trying to get my girlfriend to play the Sly series, but you know, it's whenever she feels like it. Eventually I get it though, yeah, eventually. Thank you for sitting down and enjoying this video. It means a lot to me. Once again, have a nice day and enjoy yourself.